Please, keep it going. Such an incredible film. I have the distinct pleasure to welcoming our speaking guests tonight, two esteemed editors who will be discussing this film and their work. Would you please put it together? Join me in welcoming the editor of this film, Dylan Tichenor, and the moderator for this evening, Affonso Gonçalves.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello. Thank you for being here. It's like I'm so happy to be here because, like you guys, I'm a huge fan of this movie. This movie is I use this, and I told Dylan this, that is one of the two films that I watch every time before I start a film because it's so many details. There's so much of this, the timing of this film that's just incredible. I'm a huge fan of Dylan too. So,
Right back at you, Fonz.
thank you. So I'm just gonna jump. I forgot that there was a dedication to Altman, and it's kind of interesting because basically you work a little bit with sales, but your editing career, I think it's fair to say, was through Altman, right?
100% started with Jerry Peroni, the late great, and Bob Altman and his producer were super great to me. I got to them as a PA, and they kept me and let me sort of rise up and try things and see if I could do it. And I was apprentice and second assistant and first assistant, and had some other weird, cool jobs that don't even have names. And yeah, I did maybe 5 movies with Bob. And I didn't even know when I got together with Paul Anderson, the director of this, that he knew Bob that well or that he meant that much to him. But I think over the course of our friendship and working relationship, I got that. And Bob passed the year before, or kind of the beginning of making this.
And with Paul, you pretty much was involved with him from the get-go, because I know the Hard Eight, you came in, the film was done, and you had to help him recut the film to go to Cannes. And
Yeah, Barbara Tulliver cut Hard Eight, called Sydney when it started, and then Hard Eight. I was basically a post supervisor. I met Paul and, said, I saw a screening of Sydney. And the studio had taken it away from him, recut the negative and changed all the music and stuff. And his version got into Cannes. And he called me and said, can you help me, no pun intended, get it to ready for Cannes in 6 weeks? And I have this much money and blah, blah, blah. So I sort of did that. And Barbara came out and, recut the picture so that the negative, we could make that work. But yeah, I was involved in it. Yep.
And then for the next one, how did you get to do Boogie Nights?
Boogie Nights, I I said I wanted to. He let me read it, and I was like, this is amazing, and I'm happy to help, love to help. It took him a little while. He was sort of, because I had only cut by myself, and it wasn't even by myself. I had only cut like a music movie for Arts and Entertainment Network from one of Bob's movies. There was a bunch of jazz in the movie. So Paul took a real chance on me, but I think he and I got along very well. We saw movies the same way. We were enthusiastic and excited. We spoke the same language about movies, and no, I'm grateful he took a chance on me. And truthfully, Mark Graziano's credited on this, and we knew Mark from the New Line days, which was Boogie Nights and Magnolia, and Mark told this story that no one told them that Paul was hiring me as an editor. They had disapproved me. They were like, no, we don't know who this person is. You need a real editor. And he said, I came to the studio one day, and there was a guy in the editing suite cutting, and I called back to the studio and I said, there is a guy editing this movie. I don't know who it is, but we're going to have to figure out who the real editor is. And basically, I guess I was on probation for a couple weeks, and they saw what I had done. Not they, Paul and the producers saw what I had done, and they're like, oh, okay, and they gave me a raise, and so that it was like this sort of best job opportunity that you could hope for. It worked out.
And the little movie you mentioned that you work with Altman, it was Just 34, was it called?
That was the music movie was
Music
called
movie, yeah.
Jazz
It got nominated for an Emmy. That was
34.
my
Yeah, it did get nominated for an Emmy.
yeah. Anyway, I just want to just jump into this one. What's your process with Paul? Because you guys know each other so well. Does he send you the script? You guys talk about the script, and then how is like from script to this? What's the journey?
You know, same old story. It just happens. No, but Paul does involve me kind of early, and I talk to him about the ideas, and as we got more closer and closer over the years, you know, I mean, like Phantom Thread started as he just pitched me an idea, one sentence over the table on his porch one night. We were just drinking and smoking cigarettes, and he said, "I'm thinking about this." And I give him my reactions and try to help him sort it out. And he'll send me pages or scenes or something like that. On Blood, yeah, I read some pages, then I read a draft, talked to him about it. The ending took a long time to come to fruition on that movie. There was a couple different endings for a long time. And this one that's in the movie is a bit wackadoo, but the other ones were more wackadoo. And then, you know, on Blood, actually, I was finishing Jesse James, Andrew Dominik's movie, so when Paul started to shoot. So I couldn't go to location in Texas where most of it was shot. And Tanya Regal, if anybody knows Tanya, Tatiana Regal, great editor, whom I had known, agreed to come in and sort of cut dailies just to be there, and she did kind of a full pass on the movie. We did start over, nothing to do with what she did, but she was super helpful. So the truth is, I came, and then I went to Marfa, to Texas, to see Paul a couple times during that time, and I would go sit with Tanya and look at stuff. I can't remember when, but we came to New York. We were so it's shooting in Texas, and we lived in LA. And we went to New York, rented an apartment in Soho, and cut for like 6 months here. And that's where basically the movie got cut.
So, but were you watching footage as
Yeah.
Paul? You were?
Yeah.
So
every day.
you had involvement. You're like, okay, I need this, or I like this, I like what I'm seeing. Okay.
Yeah. And in fact, we ended up replacing an actor on this movie about 3 or 4 weeks in. It was kind of a big deal, and I remember saying to Paul, so I have a pass on this scene. They're in 2 different movies, you know, and he was like, I know, it's killing me. I don't know what to do. I can't, whatever. There were issues. And he said, come down here. So I went to Marfa, and it was sort of like a mafia thing, and we took a walk in the woods and talked about what to do. Anyway, it was, yeah, totally involved. My process is I watch dailies on a big screen in a screening room when sometimes they get mad and don't let me, but basically that's what I do, and I take notes, and then I pull all that stuff, and I cut from that. So I did do that while they were shooting. I just couldn't be there with him to work on stuff on the weekends if he needed to or stuff like that. So that's what Tanya did.
So she was there.
She was in Marfa, in a trailer, but I think only for about 4 weeks, not for the whole time or anything. But yeah.
There's something that happens in the film, and I think I read an interview that you gave specifically about HW, that I read that you ask for more close-ups of him because, and it's amazing when you watch the film how much of that changes the course of, because there are so many of the wide shots, so many things that happen, and it's really, the movie, it feels to me, it's almost like a horror movie, the way you're cutting. The tension is just incredible all the time, because when the cut finally comes, and you don't know when it's going to happen. So you hold, and you kind of follow Daniel Day-Lewis' tempo, like he's acting is what. But it kind of set up the first scene, how it's going to be, which I want to talk about it, but I just want to, hear about your process, like, I think I need to use this kid's close-up to actually reinforce. There's something about their relationship that's so important.
Yeah, and we did from the beginning talk about it like a horror movie, like a gothic movie, hence the typeface and everything, and the music, and that was the approach. You know, it was just dread. You know, just a sort of curtain of kind of dis-ease. HW was this great kid, local kid. His name is Dylan, actually. My thing about that was I always thought Daniel's character was, you know, Daniel's amazing to watch. Just you're mesmerized, but I didn't think I was gonna like him, and I didn't think I was gonna feel a lot of sympathy for him just based on the page. And then when Daniel started doing the performance, I thought, yep, I'm really not gonna feel a lot of sympathy for this guy. And he had a relationship with his son, and it was key in certain places, but I did ask Paul and had a conversation with him, like, I think if we can tell this through HW's eyes a little bit more, it might be more effective, or it might help. And I did ask him to get shots of him, and he actually added a scene, if not two scenes. The scene where they sit together on the ground looking out over the soon-to-be oil field, and he talks about, I always remember Daniel says, Point Wainimi, which I grew up hearing it pronounced Point Hoanimi, but he says Point Wainimi, which is just a coast up in California. And that was added for that reason, to try to, because at the end of that scene, if I remember correctly, HW is asking him, well, what are we going to give the Sunday family? Or, what, you know, how's this going to work? And he's like, nothing, who cares? And seeing his reaction to that sets the stage for the whole third act. You know, they were divergent in their moral approach to the world from day one. It's important that it ended up being a really important thread, I think.
Well, it is, I mean, it's just because at the end of the film, if you reverse engineer the whole thing, it just sets up like how much guilt and anger and the way he feels about the son is like, you're not my son, you're just like dropping a basket. It is just amazing because you think the journey, it's actually how much pain. The scenes, that beautiful scene in the train when he's a baby and he's just playing with his mustache, and the voiceover comes in. It was the first time, it was like 50 minutes in the film, it's the first time you actually hear his voice, and then there's a close-up and you hear commotion, but you don't see it for a while. So what's amazing about the film, that the film and you specifically teaches us how to watch it. Because the tempo of everything, like the first scene is like this man, he's just super precise about what he's doing, like how he does it, and he just puts this stuff in a bucket, and he goes up and he lights the match, and he just like, oh, and he's just doing his thing. Is like, when is the dynamite's gonna go? Yeah. And he goes up, and then he gets there like leisurely, and he's trying to pull the bucket, and he's tries once, tries twice, and doesn't work, and then he goes off. But you don't know how deep it is till he goes down, which is really amazing to me. He's like, oh shit, this is really, he was really down there. And then he breaks and he goes down, which is amazing. And then the next step, it's like, you know, he broke his leg, and he thinks like, oh shit, how is he gonna go up? But the only thing he's thinking about is it's like,
at that time, I think he was looking for silver.
Yes,
yeah,
that's it. But he just
digging
finds
stuff
it,
out of
and
the
he's
ground,
just
yeah.
like with the leg, and then there's that pen up, and then the vista, and he's just lying there. And the next scene, he's just lying on the floor. It's like, how the fuck did you get there?
Yeah, it's this,
And he's just like, well, because he is who he is. So you know who this guy is. Yes,
he dragged himself with one arm. Well, and some stuff that was elided from the cut just for time. I know that doesn't sound plausible, but we did cut stuff out for time. He had a horse and a donkey, and they died, and there were issues, and so that's why he ended up trying to pull up this heavy thing by himself. But that was 10 minutes I spared everyone.
But it's amazing because basically what he says to me as an audience, like, this guy would do anything for this. This guy is like, this is...
He's a Terminator for
100%. Yeah. There's nothing going to stop him to drag his ass all the way there because of this and then that. He's always thinking ahead, which is incredible. And
Daniel really broke his rib falling down that well, by the way.
He did.
Yeah, that when you see the rung of the ladder break, the rung of the ladder broke, and he fell down the well.
Oh, wow.
Even though that was sort of meant to happen, it was meant to happen when he was on a descender rig, and not when he wasn't on a descender rig, which is what is in the movie.
He's probably appreciated because he's like
Sure, yeah, he appreciated it. No, but Daniel, he's amazing. Everything you could think. He all those drawings he makes, all the things that he builds, he really just did it. He researched it, he did it. Jack Fisk, our great production designer, built everything for real.
Yeah.
That's part of the verisimilitude of the film is really there on the screen in front of you. It's a great thing.
Yeah, the pace is amazing. Then talking about the other, that's the world you see, and but then there's the world you hear. And I know how much you love sound design and how great you are. The scene at the derrick with the explosion when you shift. It's like all of a sudden you're inside his head, and the sound goes out, and it becomes something that he's really into. It's like how much freaks him out, and it eventually freaks his father out. How was that? Was that process that you guys found out? Is this something you found out in the cutting room, or what was the process through it?
The sound approach to that?
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of just did that because it made sense, and because this was an inflection point where we're now going to steer the whole story towards Daniel and HW, their relationship. That really felt like, we see things from HW's point of view here and there. There's a couple scenes with him and not Daniel, but that really said something bad happened in his brain. He has trouble hearing. I felt that I needed to do it that way to tell the story, because otherwise you wouldn't really know, and it felt like a good way to do it. I don't know. I don't have anything other than that, but yeah, no, it wasn't really discussed, but that's what ended up happening. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because it happened. There's another scene where Daniel's talking to him, and there's no sound.
Yeah, it's kind of right after that. We sort of lose the sound, and then you hear tiny little bit. Can you hear me? Can you understand me? Yeah, really intense.
Yeah.
Imagine being that little kid, Dylan, forget his name, but just going to act with Daniel Day-Lewis, who was totally being the person who was written on the page in front of you all day long. I think that would be a crazy experience.
Yeah.
Covered in oil, which was, by the way, it's called Methicil, and it is the base, you're all going to want to know this, of McDonald's milkshakes. It's not black, we added the black, but the goo, the actual substance, is the base of McDonald's milkshakes.
Nice.
So,
how is your process then when you finish a cut to work with Paul? Like, when does he come in? Are you sending him cuts of the film, or you do a whole cut
during
by
shooting,
yourself?
you mean?
Yes.
Normally during shooting, yes, I sort of do a cut, send him things when it needs to be talked about. Sometimes comes in on the weekends. And then we sit down and start at the beginning and basically recut in post. And stuff stays the same, stuff changes. But
Is he watching the footage himself, or do you guys watch together?
we watch
afterwards?
dailies.
You do?
Is that what you mean? Yeah, of all the directors that I've worked with, he watches by far the most dailies, and still does. Still watches on film. Yeah, and in fact, in the early days, we would sit next to each other and oh, that's cool. Oh, that needs to be in the movie. And he would say, well, I'm thinking about take 4 for the part with the chair, because I go, okay. And I say, oh, that's great. We did that, which is kind of maybe a bygone era. I don't know that it doesn't happen for me anymore with directors. Directors barely have time to watch dailies, let alone talk to you about it all. So, but that's how I came up with Altman. He would do that, watch dailies every night till he fell asleep. And yeah, he would talk to Jerry. Yeah, I took a lot from how I came up with Altman and Jerry.
Were you on those when he was sitting watching?
Yeah,
the
oh
videos?
yeah.
Were-
Bob would invite everybody to dailies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, anybody from the crew who wanted to come could come. So depending on the day and what was shot, there would be between 5 and 45 people in dailies, and it was food and beer, and Bob would smoke weed and pass out.
Very nice. What's your process? Again, the other thing I know you're great at and you really love is dealing with music, because there's a lot of. I mean, Johnny's. I think this first soundtrack that he did was this for this movie.
Yeah, they had an album called Body Song, which is not. It's a soundtrack, but it's sort of a tone poem kind of movie. So they had done a visual thing, and obviously Radiohead made videos, but. Yeah, this was his first score. Yes.
And how was that experience?
It was great, and I think it turned out great. And Johnny was very, he's open, and Paul has a lot of music ideas, and they started talking early on. And Johnny would do a thing where he would compose, sort of bits, songs, demo songs, 5 minutes, 4 minutes that were inspired mainly by the script and by dailies. We didn't show him cuts very early. It's not how he did it. And he would just take the vibe and compose. And then there were a number of cues that we played around with early on that then Johnny would get inspired by, existing cues from classical composers. A couple of them stayed in the movie, the Arvo Par. Penderecki was a big influence on this. That was something that Johnny and Paul talked about early on.
And also, so in the sound design, so you do your pass, you have these ideas, and then when do the sound designers come in and actually start working with you to develop, because the sound is so important in this film, the humble of the oil and all the stuff that's happening, and I think you feel it sometimes. You don't hear it, but you feel it.
Good.
Which is really a sign that such a great sound design and such a great mix.
It is a great mix. This, I'm going to be a jerk and not totally remember, but Chris Scarbozio, who was in the other chair? I can't remember. Probably Matt Wood worked on this. I should have watched the credits. But guys we worked with several times up at Skywalker did amazing work. I did a lot in the Avid. And it's very important to all of us. I don't know. What else can I say?
What's your relationship with your assistants? And how close do you, do you show them cuts? Do you have them, what is the?
Don't talk to them. No, I love my assistants. Yes, they are an integral part of the process. Absolutely show them cuts, get them to cut things. Always give the assistants something to cut, at least more than one thing. My first sits in dailies with me, and I talk to them, tell them what I'm thinking, want to hear what they're thinking. And that happens with cuts. We'll reconnoiter after screenings, and I just download. I hire people who I want to work with, not just to be a filing system or an email server. I want their opinions. I want to teach them. A lot of what I do is get them to the place where they can help me, or completely, like my last assistant was doing, pull the selects for me once they learn my system and how off my time code is and things like that. That they learn a lot by doing that. All the assistants have said that. Just because you get to see what I'm thinking by pulling the bits I'm trying to build the scene from, and putting it in the order that I think it is. It's there's a lot there, and it's so important. I came up with the apprentice system, an actual being an apprentice, reconning film trims and sitting next to an editor, watching what they did all day. With Geraldine. Yeah, not all day, but but also Maisie and Susie Elmiger, Maisie Hoy and Susie Elmiger. They were all around on the Altman things, and I want to continue that. I think it's super important to keep people excited. I want people who want to be editors, and then I want to they help a lot. They help me, and I help them.
And as a matter of fact, one of your assistant works with Paul sometimes, right?
Yeah, Andy is cutting for Paul now. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think we should open for questions if you're...
Sure.
Hey, thank you so much for this incredible movie. In watching this again, I forgot how many scenes involve like liquid and like stuff like flying onto the camera lens, especially the end, like him throwing the bowling ball, the thing like pops up. My question, I guess, is about when things like that pop up in kind of a series of takes, like, oh, there's only one, specifically with something like that at the end. There's only one where something crazy, like anomalous happens. Are you like, that's got to go in? If something's like crazy and you're willing to sacrifice like a performance, or someone's trying to argue, oh, this actually shouldn't be in something like that. I wonder how you deal with stuff like that, specifically for this movie and kind of in general. Are you the one that's kind of fighting for stuff like that to stay in, or are other people trying to keep that in?
Well, a lot of times directors have their own things, or we agree on things like, ooh, that's super cool. There was a thing in Boogie Nights where Mark Wahlberg was in that big scene with Alfred Molina, all the firecrackers going off, and it was like day 5 of shooting on this set, and he literally flatlined. He sat down, he had a line, he had stuff to do, but he just sat there for a minute, and his eyes glazed over, and Paul and I looked at each other, and Daly's like, oh, fuck. That is going in the movie. And it did. And, you ask Mark, and he was like, yeah, I don't know what happened. I left the building. But it really worked for the scene. To your question, it's a very important sort of aspect to know yourself as an editor over, because what is the hierarchy of performance, camera move, lighting, general feeling that you use to judge things? And generally performance trumps everything. For me, that said, I'm very pay attention to camera. Things like that are great if they can go in. I remember 2 things that you're talking about. One is he steps on the handle of the pan that he's been peeing into in his personal bowling alley, and it flipped over and splashed all over. And I was like, yes, that's going in the movie. But it also was coupled with a great take of Daniel walking towards camera. I was like, well, okay, we want that one. And then the other one is an early on one. He does a thing where he's either pulling a rope or running his hand down the drill bit, and some methacil hit the lens, hit the filter, and I wanted that too. But that's a small piece of film, that one. But yeah, it's cool. I'm not the guy who always loves, ooh, blood on the lens, or I don't necessarily need that. But in certain situations where it really feels real and adds to the "you are there" vibe, yeah, for sure. But it is important to balance. Who's in charge of picking? Yeah, go. I don't know.
All right, next.
Hi, thank you for showing the film, for one. I was just going to ask, what is your process approaching assemblies or first cuts? Like, are there any guiding principles, or are you just trying to get something watchable on the screen to work with? Just like how that first putting everything together is like.
Guiding principles. Well, often I think some editors I know call it the editor's cut. Some people call it the first cut. Some people call it an assembly. It always does feel to me like the first cut. It might not be everything that I, the editor, want to do, because it's in concert with the director in terms of talking, and the script is a guide. But it is an opportunity to, aside from some maybe key things that have been discussed, and using the director's feedback that comes through the line script and the scripty and whatever conversations, we get to pick the takes that go into the first cut and decide kind of how things are going to get cut and what's important, and solve a lot of problems. That's the way I look at it. How can I solve these things that are clearly issues now so that we can move past it? Try not to be precious about it, but truthfully, a lot of that first cut ends up staying sometimes. And it's not just to get things on the screen, although I always seem to run out of time, and maybe 1 or 2 scenes get short shrift. But no, it's a first pass on the movie. It is largely reflective of my thoughts and taste based on what I knew during shooting and during dailies. But a lot of times you don't have time to do everything as intricately or as diligently as you want to. So yes, it just has to get done. Like, I don't spend 3 days on a scene. I got to just do it in one day. I got to get going. I forget who said, somebody said this. It may have been Sally Menke said, I try to do 200 feet of cut footage a day during dailies, and that keeps me up to camera. So I keep that in my mind. I never achieve it. It's about maybe 3 minutes plus, but I try to keep that in mind. Like, I'm not sitting here making this perfect. Perfect isn't what it's about right now. It's about, yes, a cut, but a lot more involved than just sort of slapping it together. Yeah, if that answers your question.
And we do have another question off to the left.
Just a question, like, when you see the final film out in theaters, editor's cut, all that stuff, do you ever have those, like, one or two instances where you go, oh, I should have done this, or that shouldn't have stayed in, or I should have kept that scene in, that kind of thing? Do you have any instances examples where you can say, even for this movie, where it's just, oh, no, that should have been, longer, kept the scene in, kept the scene with the horses in, whatever it is?
Definitely longer. The worst is 10 years later and you see it on television and you go, what? That's the ending we decided on? That's ludicrous. And that has happened. This film in particular, I don't know that I feel too much about that. Always little, it's like any sort of craftsman. When you look at your work, you'll see, I remember a cabin that my family had, that we had a guy, an old Maine fisherman guy who would build cabins, and we had him build our cabin, and we had him over to dinner about 5 years after we had been in the cabin, and he's a typical sort of Maine guy, and he didn't speak too much, but he sat there, and he's looking at the walls, and my mom said, what are you looking at, Bob? And he said, mistakes. So that's what makes it alive. If it's, what is perfect? I don't know what that is, but there are a number of movies, I will say, of mine that I see that I go, yeah, that's what it is. I wouldn't change it. And then is another pile of movies where it's like, oof, wish we had gone back to that other version or worked longer. Or Magnolia, Paul texted me one day, and he's about 5 years after the movie came out and it was on TV, and he said, Magnolia's too long, Dylan. Thanks a lot. I won't get into the truth of that, but yeah, of course you do. It's a big argument for letting the creative process have time to breathe. I always tell the studios, they're like, you got to get the director to cut more of this stuff out. I said, well, give them a little more time to live with it, and they will come to that conclusion themselves. But if you press, like get it down, cut it out, they're going to resist because they're not ready to let it go yet. They don't see it the same way. But after 3 screenings, they'll be like, "Ooh, that scene is too long." You go, "Yeah, let's trim it." So I think there's a creative process to be supported in that, but there's always going to be mistakes or things to do differently. Greater, more or less.
Question right here next to him. I think there's a scene at the end that's a flashback, and it really stands out in that there's not any other flashbacks in the movie. I think it's pretty effective, but I was curious whether there was back and forth on whether to include that.
Are you talking about young HW with Daniel in the field?
That's the one.
Certainly there was back and forth. It's a funny moment. And yes, we talked a lot about it because it was an idea that popped up that wasn't in the script. And when we tried it, it really made us feel something. So we kept it. That's the answer. It is actually a moment outside of shooting that I hate to say that, but in the interest of having honest discussions, it was between takes, and the camera operator, which was probably Robert Elswit, grabbed it, of just the actor and Daniel being together, but they were character adjacent. They were close enough, and it was illustrating exactly the contrast that we needed to illustrate at that point in the movie. so it stuck. And there was a lot of talk, but only between me and Paul. No one. We didn't ask anybody else. It worked for us. So that's that answer.
We got
Are
a
there really
question.
no other flashbacks? Is that the only one? Could be true. I can't remember.
We have another question in the back.
I'm curious about the scene where the oil rig catches on fire, and was that a complicated scene to put together with the light going from daylight to nighttime? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just the fact that you bring it up, yes, and it was a big discussion in the cutting room. That was talked about ad nauseum because I really had a problem with the time of day changing, and Paul was like, "It doesn't matter," and in truth, it doesn't matter. But you know, we built a real oil rig, we set it on fire and shot it with 4 cameras or 5 cameras. So that's part of the deal, is that we had what we had. But the great stuff in sort of as the sun was going down, it wasn't going to line up with the sky. And we did do stuff with ILM to help it, but it couldn't be totally fixed. You know, we did what was best for the movie with the stuff that we had. We could probably today, Paul was pretty historically, you know, not enthusiastic about visual effects. We used some on that movie for sure, but you know, his bent will always be away from it. I think that's the answer.
We have time for one final question. We're going to one door over to the right.
I was curious what questions you might ask yourself when you sort of have a assembly that you and the director are both pretty happy with, but you're sort of taking yourself out of the scene by scene issues and looking at the full story structure and how you sort of take yourself out and look at the bigger picture, and maybe what questions you both are discussing.
This movie in particular, you mean?
Any of
or
your
general?
yeah, your process.
Well, gaining perspective is very important. Often screening with other people really helps you with that, kind of turbocharges that perspective thing. I like to watch it in different places. You know, I like to at least every couple weeks in the post process watch the movie, and maybe we go to a screening room, or maybe we watch it at home, or you know, so that I have a different environment, and it makes the movie feel different to me when I watch it with different people in different places. So that helps. The questions are always, you know, do we need this? Do we need this part? Do we need that part? Are we telling this as effectively as possible? A lot of the questions are asked by your stomach and answered by your head, and it's you sort of feel. I don't know. I don't have a list of sort of stock questions to ask, but I do have things that I have done, something like I call a skeleton cut, which even if the cut's working, I sort of, even if it's just for me, like to do a pass that is throw away everything that I think is not needed to tell the story. And like ruthlessly, like, okay, we can still tell the story without those 3 scenes. Or this whole character, and just see what does that tell me about the movie. Does it make me reevaluate the balance of it? You know, on Phantom Thread, we ended up throwing out because we had problems figuring out the balance of this. What is going on? This isn't working. And halfway through the movie, you're just going, I'm not sure what this is about. And it's because there was an extra 45 minutes at the beginning. And after pulling that out, it all became a lot clearer, and then we took a little bit from the end and moved it to the middle, and you know, yeah, so you constantly evaluating, but you know when it's kind of firing, or as the director I'm working with now says, it lifts off. You sort of feel it like, oops, this is working, okay, good. So I don't know, I don't think I have a, you know, a regimen of questions, but always trying to make it better, and I mean, I'm trying to get at the the like bottom line of your question. Are you, because you said take yourself out of it. What do you mean by that? Like another opinion or? Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that's, I use a scene board for one thing. That really helps. After screenings, I sort of stand in front of it and look at it, and it reminds me of the movie, but I'm not worried about all these little cuts or anything like that. I'm feeling the movie, and, you know, partly what has to happen is you have to fix a few of the problems so they don't bump for you anymore, and then you can ignore them. It's really hard to ignore little things when they bump you out of the movie. You can train yourself to not be super anal so that you can allow it to not be perfect and still watch it, knowing that I will get the chance to do this other stuff. I don't have to worry about all these little things, because you actually can't. Sort of, I can't, or in the movies I work on, you can't just time-wise, schedule-wise. There's a lot of people involved who are behind you working on things. You can't just, you know, do your little needle point in the little corner of one scene for 3 days. What'd you say? Oh, that was a laugh. Anyway, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
for coming.
everybody.
Thank
you,
Dylan.
Fonzie.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.